Okay. Rebecca Sullivan, welcome to your home, your veranda.
It's the first time I've been welcomed to my own home.
I have a habit of doing that. You were here much longer before I was.
Yeah.
In the Clare Valley.
Yep.
And I'm very grateful that you've given me your time on a Sunday morning.
Thank you.
When you could be doing lots of other things.
Should be doing lots of other things. There's a massive difference.
Well, I trust at the end of this interview you'll be, pleased that there was you felt there was some value in spending the time. So welcome to the Regenerative journey. As you may be aware, I like to dig into the journeys of my guests. And
was that a pun? Was that an intended pun?
What, the Regenerative journey?
The dig bit.
The dig? No, no, it wasn't.
It was good.
I always say that. That's it. Actually, my wife doesn't. She's not. She thinks it should be. I don't know what the alternative would be. To delve. No, delve was the word she would have preferred, but dig was what happened. So, and I like to start and sit in my guest's natural environment, which is where we are. And what's going on behind me there?
It's about as natural as it gets. You've probably got a stick in your back or something.
That's right. I'm just sniffing down the chair as I relax. I'm just, something's at my bottom there.
It's all part of the welcome.
It's pretty wild here. We sitting here on your veranda at the front. We're sort of looking east, is the way I see it, across some of your country, the country you're looking after. With Damien, your husband. Tell me... your partner. I always do that, partner.
It's a bit of a sore point. We won't go there.
Is it? Okay.
That's the one thing that should be off limits.
Okay. We do. How about Damien, your friend?
Damien, my friend. My man friend.
That's the safest thing. Okay, off to a crackingly bad start there. So let's look beyond that to the east. And I'd love to know what it means for you to be sitting here. I mean, why are you here? You could have been anywhere. You've been all over the world working and teaching people and doing amazing, wonderful things. Why the Clare Valley and why this particular hill?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm back in the mid-north of South Australia, which I swore I would never do because this is where I grew up. Not in Clare, but in a little tiny town called Malala. And as a 16-year-old girl, the worst thought would be ending up where you grew up as a teenager, when the only thing you were interested in growing up in a farm region was the boys on the tractors, not the actual tractors themselves. I swore I would never come back here, and I just was pulled back here. And we moved to Clare because my parents are in Clare and Damien's parents are in Corn, so we're kind of halfway between, I guess, Adelaide, our sort of working capital, and Damien's parents, and Clare was that place. And I don't think I had any choice in it, really. It was the right place to be at that time. And this hill, well, this was lucky because we'd actually put in an offer on a different property, because I always intended, since the minute I started working in the sustainable food movement, was to live this way, off the grid, and as sustainably as I could. I didn't think it would happen quite as soon as it did, but the timing couldn't have been better, I think, from a whole matter of reasons. But yeah, we put in an offer on a different place and we didn't get it. And we were a bit heartbroken when we didn't, but in hindsight, it was the best thing that could have happened, because we ended up in this country, which is just beyond perfect for who we are, our intention in life, and our legacy that we want to create.
Tell me about that country. Tell me what you're seeing and how you see it, and what was attractive about it that sort of made you think, you know what, this is the spot.
The most attractive thing for me about this property was the fact that 20 years ago there was a handful of trees. Now we have 3 tree plantations. And I shouldn't really use the word plantation because that kind of alludes to something quite commercial.
Yeah.
We now are surrounded by trees, different species, mainly natives, 60 bird species. There were 2 birds when the people before us bought the property, Des and Leslie Menz, who are our heroes in lots of ways. It was the fact that this place had been regenerated and we saw possibility. We saw possibility not just for us, but for our community and our larger community and our country and our world. We thought if this place went from being this barren monoculture piece of soil in the big sort of wide world, the big ecosystem, and it is now currently what it is, then anything's possible. And that for me was just something that I hold in my heart and in my soul and in my body, and was just this, I guess, the start of our story in this regenerative sort of world, and what we want to do for the world, and our intention and our integrity and all of that stuff. And it was just this world of possibility. And the minute we stepped foot on it, we were just like, this is why we didn't get the other place, because this place was meant to be ours. The people we bought it from, Des and Leslie said this place was meant to be yours. We've been waiting for you to come for us to hand our work, our life's work, over to someone like you guys.
It's, and I look around, and I haven't seen photos of what it used to be, but I can imagine, to me, the heavy lifting's been done.
The heavy lifting has been done. And that was, I think, an important part of why also we chose this property, because we knew that we didn't want to spend the next 20 years doing the foundation stuff, because we probably would end up breaking up or something, because it's a huge job. And the bones are here, most of the work is done, and we knew that then we could do the important bit that we're good at, that our skill set allows us to do. We didn't know how, we wouldn't have been able to do this. We wouldn't have known where to start. But now we have this foundation of our life's work already here, and we can learn and grow with it. Doing what these guys did before us, we would spend our life just getting these trees growing, And so that was another part of why this property was right for us. We didn't want to do that bit before.
And it's a wonderful thing that it found you, and Des and Leslie found you.
Yeah.
That legacy could be continued, which is fitting, because from what we went for a drive and a walk around this morning, and there's a legacy to be left
100%.
for your children, your community, and the world. And I am I'm really excited about what I've seen this morning.
Thank you.
No, I think it's amazing the fact that you took it on.
Yeah.
There was a foundation. You have an open mind, which is probably one of the most important things. You don't have the legacy of previous farming paradigms
or family
that sort of are going to, scoff and,
yep.
cajole and scorn and carry on, which is what a lot of farmers who are changing their paradigms and their practices have to sort of deal with, understandably, because that's just human nature to sort of often be scared of change. And the older generation, I totally get that can be a real thing for them.
Yeah.
So you have an older generation that is supportive of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful.
For that, we feel really blessed. And we have two different types of older generation as well. We've obviously got, my cultural heritage, English, Australian, Irish, and then Damien's, this beautiful indigenous heritage of generations of caretakers to the land, So us having this beautiful co-culture existence here, and two supportive family networks, that saying, it takes a village, has never been truer, I didn't really understand that before we had Mally, but now I really understand it. But yeah, we're very blessed to have a really supportive family who aren't just supportive by way of, mentally, but physically, the weekends and the days off, and when both Damien and my dad, every day that they have off that they can be here helping us out, you can't do it without that. You can't take on a property like this without knowing that you've got that backup and that support.
And what a wonderful contribution they can make.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope that this property is contributing to them as well, from a therapeutic perspective, from the joy that people get when they come and see these trees and these birds and these kangaroos hopping around, and the barbecue and the food and the laughs. we hope that people are getting as much joy out of it. When friends come up here for the weekend, they're just, blown away that this is our house, this is our home, and they get to share in that, which is extraordinary.
You get to wake up to this every morning.
I know, sometimes you just take that for granted, don't you?
Totally. Hey, let's go back in time, because we're sort of. That's all like.
Oh, Malibu.
He's
been pushed around by Granny.
Pushed around by Granny. By Rebecca's mum, little looks like a little those shopping trolley or something.
It's a little shopping
trolley. That's very cool.
That's my market shopping trolley. Favourite mode of transport, shopping trolley.
What a classic. Let's go back. Let's go back to, as I said, I want to sort of delve into your regenerative journey. Steps along the way. Who was Rebecca Sullivan? Way back. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think, it started way back subconsciously without me even knowing it. I grew up in this tiny town called Malala, 500 people, surrounded by food, surrounded by sheep and wheat, and I didn't know where my food came from. I grew up in a meat and 3-veg household where if mum made spaghetti bolognese, it was like, woo, what's this fancy stuff,
European
food. The day she made stir fry, we all went, whoa, that's a bit fancy.
I'm hearing you.
Yeah, and so I grew up in that household, but I also grew up in that household of being an eater. Every single celebration was always surrounded by food, and I think that was sort of my nan's influence and my great-grandmother's influence, and so I grew up eating and celebrating through food, but couldn't have told you where food came from until I sort of started working in it, at 21, but in it from the sustainability perspective. So I always worked in hospitality, like most kids my age, through school and through studies and all of that sort of stuff. But it wasn't until I went to London on a holiday, like most Australians that go to London for a holiday.
So finish school after school.
So after school, I studied journalism, and I actually thought I wanted to be a sports journalist or a lawyer. So quite contrasting. I don't know why I wanted to be a sports journalist, because I wasn't even interested in sport.
You just wanted to be those good-looking AFL
Yeah, well, it was so random. It's because I worked on the tour down under. I did a bit of work experience, and I thought, oh yeah, I can do this. That'll do. Went to London for 6 weeks, stayed for 10 years. My first big job in London happened to be working on the Tour of Britain, which is the cycling race. And I got that job because I rang the boss of the Tour of Britain and said, oh, I heard you're bringing the milk race back, the Tour of Britain. Can I have a job? And he went, who are you, firstly? I went, I did 2 weeks work experience on the tour down under, I can do it. And he's like, no, you can't have a job. Sort of hung up on me, and I kept ringing him for 3 weeks because I was working for this PR company at the time, and this real fancy pants PR company, luxury travel PR company, and I hated it. I just felt so fake being there. So long story short, got a job on the tour of Britain. They finally let me do work experience. They fired the PR manager, gave me the job after it because I managed to talk my way into being good at it, and worked in the cycling world for 3 years. But what happened during that time is my first aha moment. I like to talk about these aha moments, these moments that set you on your path that you don't even know are happening at the time. And that was, I was at this fiesta after the tour, the Giro d'Italia, which is the big Italian version of the Tour of Britain. And at the time I was working on the Tour of Britain, but I was also a press officer for one of the pro teams, Barloworld. I helped set up because I talked my way into that job too. And here I am, this sort of naive 24-year-old sitting at this table, and there were 50 of us sitting at this table after this big race, and someone's nans, nonnas, uncles, aunties, grandma or something had put on this feast. And from nowhere, you've got 50 people sitting at a table, all speaking different languages. So Colombians, Spanish, Italian, Australians. And I'm sitting at this table having the most amazing meal of my life. 10 courses that had been thrown together from nothing. And the cheese course comes out. And here I am, I'm sitting there, and I had a few vinos, along with everyone else at the table. And it was sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, this cheese gets brought out. And it's sitting on the table in front of me. I'm sitting there and my plate was sort of moving a bit, and I was like, oh shit, I've had a few too many wines or something. And I sort of hit the bloke next to me who's Italian. I'm like, oh my God, there is something in my cheese. is moving. And he speaks terrible English. I speak terrible Italian. And he's like, oh no, he explains to me that it's called Kazumazu, and it's this Italian Sardinian tradition, and it's got live maggots in it.
Oh, you're kidding.
No. So here's this naive, nasally 24-year-old Australian who says, I'm not eating that shit, like so loud.
Suddenly everyone could
right,
English.
Literally like a Hollywood movie. It's like the spotlight comes down on me, the table goes quiet, everyone's staring at me, and in that moment everyone knew exactly what I'd said. And in that moment, I was so embarrassed. I pick up this cheese, and I put it in my mouth, and I eat it. And not only is it the most delicious thing I've ever tasted, I have this giant aha moment of this realization that food is so much more than food. That this cheese was something that was tradition, that had been passed down for hundreds of years, that people pay huge money on the black market for because it's illegal, because it's dangerous, even though grandmas have been doing it for centuries. And there is a story behind it, and such a big story, and this story involves people and landscape and fermentation and agriculture and heritage and story. And I'm so blown away by this. And I didn't really realise it right then, but it all sort of just, fell like dominoes in front of me. I quit my job about 2 weeks later. I joined the slow food movement, became the UK youth ambassador for the slow food movement in the UK. And from that minute on, I was an activist, and I was imparted in the food system. I knew, I wanted to know exactly everything about food, all of its story, all of its heritage, all of its tradition, all of its importance, right down to how it was grown and the soil it came from. And that was it. I've been there for 15 years.
Isn't it fascinating that a potentially awkward,
very
embarrassing, sort of down moment,
embarrassing,
very public,
yeah,
was actually the catalyst, was the turning point,
of my life's work, just from being I was mortified at myself, at the fact that I'd offended this grandma who lovingly cooked us this meal and presented this cheese to me so excitedly, trying to tell me what it was, but couldn't understand her, and I was probably too pissed to understand her as well. But do you know what I mean? Like, that moment just changed everything for me.
It's almost like you had an obligation. Not an obligation is probably the wrong word, but there was then a responsibility for you to. I mean, what a wonderful responsibility you now have to be teaching other people.
Totally. And there was this nonna, right? And I realised also at that time, like looking back on it, that 3 or 4 years working in cycling, we used to have to go to training camps in Italy all the time. And we'd always stay in this hotel that this nonna ran, and I would always sneak into the kitchen and just be fascinated that every time I'd go there, it would be a different season. We'd be eating something else.
This is the same nonna who made the cheese.
Same nonna.
Oh, wow.
Right. But she would cook for us all the time, but there would be like 3 ingredients, and it would be the best tasting thing I'd ever had. And without even knowing it, was learning about the seasons and learning about food and all of these things that it was almost like they were being just hammered into me slowly, just by this nonna. And I think that was also the catalyst of this granny skills idea as well.
Nonna skills.
Nonna skills, exactly. But it was just watching the way the Italians eat just was like, that's how I want to live.
It's a pretty, I don't know, I can't think of the word, sort of hard, impenetrable person to be able to go to Italy and not be enthused, inspired, impacted by their culture, their food culture, isn't it?
Absolutely. I took my whole family, aunties, uncles, nan, everyone, to one of my dearest friends has a beautiful agriturismo in Tuscany. And one of my aunties, it's one of the best moments of my life. This is a woman who didn't know you put salt in vegetables to make them taste better. Never tried an olive in her life, real 3 meat and 3 veg. Tried an olive for her first time on that farm, and now uses salt in her cooking.
There you go.
You can't.
It's never too late.
You can't. Like that 2-week period with my family in that villa, sharing food like that is one of the greatest moments I've had. Just watching these people just fall in love with food in a completely different way, you know.
It's the glue. It's a relationship glue, isn't it? We went to my family and I went to Italy a couple of years ago. Thank God we did, nearly 2 years ago, and for 2 months. And I've mentioned it before in other interviews, but it was a life-changing experience because of the simplicity, you know, and the simplicity of the ingredients, simplicity of the preparation, simplicity of even eating it. Like, you know, it's just like, it's on a plate, use your hands, get into it. And there's a fair chance, you know, given the places we went to and as generally the culture, that everything on your plate originated within a mile of where you were sitting. And that didn't matter whether it was a, you know, half fancy restaurant, you know, near Rome or in the hills of Puglia or somewhere, you know.
One of the best meals I've had in my life was near that agriturismo. After we worked on Slow Food Nation in San Francisco, about 25 of us from the US that worked on this event together all took a pilgrimage to Sibylla's farm because she worked on it too. And we went to the truffle festival first in Alba, and then to the farm, and we all stayed in this villa together and just cooked for a week and truffle and everything. But we went to another Nonna's restaurant, you know, and it was literally on plastic picnic chairs, you know, those red and white gingham plastic tablecloths. It was 40 euros each, and we had, oh God, it just makes me want to cry thinking about this meal. You know, it was truffle season, so there was truffle shaved on everything. You know, this big piece of beef with truffle shaved on it, you know, all the antipasti, truffle shaved on it. Oh, it was just an extraordinary week, you know, and everything was just simple. It was, you know, 3 or 4 ingredients, and it just
life-changing.
So much joy.
Well, clearly it changed your life. What happened next? And you're inspired.
So I joined the slow food movement. I first became a bit too hardcore, I think, as an activist, right? I was getting arrested a bit, you know, for
I mean, that's like saying, oh, I was getting pregnant a bit. Yeah. You got arrested or you didn't get arrested?
All right, I was getting arrested. Not a bit, a lot, properly. But
were you chanting yourself? You were chanting yourself to what?
No, well, to out the front of, you know, the House of Commons in London, you know, for protesting for farmers. You know, this girl who came from farming country who didn't even want to consider being a farmer or marrying a farmer or being in that country, you know, protesting. It was I was in the food movement. It was a really exciting time in the UK. It was, you know, around that 2008 time when Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall was doing Fish Fight and Jamie Oliver was starting to do all of his school, you know, his campaigning stuff, and I was lucky enough to get this job because I had been arrested, and the guy who worked for an events company, Philip, my boss, said, "You want to work on the Real Food Festival?" He was also part of the Slow Food Movement. Let's create a festival together. Oh, hell yeah. So I'd been getting arrested for protesting for farmers, for things like pig feed prices, for, you know, unfair conditions. It was this eat British bacon time where everyone was eating bacon from Denmark and other countries where the pigs have the worst life imaginable, and British bacon is some of the best bacon you'll ever try, and much better conditions, etc., etc. So it was, you know, we buried Anthony Wall Thompson in a coffin full of cauliflowers out the front of Tesco, you know, so we were trespassing, that sort of stuff. So,
that's
yeah,
good.
no, it was, I don't have a record, but I've been in trouble.
You had more fun.
I had way more fun, but what I found was my activism was way too preachy, and what I found is throughout the years of learning and growing up and, you know, all that stuff, my passion was enough to make change, and people stopped listening when I was being preachy, as people do, you know. And so I got this amazing job as the Real Food Festival manager, and we wanted to create Salone del Gusto, which is the slow food festival in Turin, one of the most extraordinary events I've ever been to. We wanted to create that in London, and we did a pretty bloody good job of it. We had 450 small producers that didn't have to pay thousands of pounds to be in Earls Court. What we did was we managed to convince the sponsors to pay and subsidise all these amazing small producers to be in front of not just the consumer but the trade. So we did 1 day trade, 3 days consumer.
Cool. Yeah.
So these guys were in front of Selfridges buyers, Fortnum and Masons, you know, Marks and Spencer, Waitrose, all these people, all these buyers that they wouldn't normally get in front of for the first day, and then 3 days of consumer. So we had 450 small producers. We had a rabbit skinning area where people really saw what real food was. We had a cookery school. We had this debate with we had Jamie Oliver. We had Zach Goldsmith, who's a politician in the UK. We had Hugh Fernie Whittingstall. We had all of these amazing food people in one room for 4 days, and it was extraordinary. And I was one of the creators of that. You know, I had bloody cows in Earl's Court so people could learn how to milk a cow. You know, it was wonderful. And from there I got to fly straight to San Francisco and work on Slow Food Nation, which only happened once in 2008. It was an 80,000 person event with Slow Food USA, and I worked with 25 of the most incredible humans ever. Lived in Berkeley, you know, near Shapen East. Worked for Alice Waters and Michael Pollan and
Wow, cool.
all of my heroes. So that was sort of the grounding for my work, and from there it's, you know, been all I guess off the back of those two wonderful experiences, and working with, you know, people like Joel Salatin and all of those guys who back then, you know, in 2010 when I did all that, I had no idea how much of an impact they were going to have, because they were sort of, you know, some of the, Michael Pollan was still, you know, easy to get hold of back then, you know. And it was this really exciting time to be working in food sustainability and starting off my career in that, because that was the foundation for my food career, and I was working with people like that.
And that's the bit that's missing, isn't it? I think in the world of food, and less now because things have evolved. But you know, farmers are really good at growing food, you know. But it's like, you know, you gave them an opportunity, those 450 producers, to get to middle of London and air their wares to a lot of people. Then if you and your colleagues hadn't done that, I mean, they don't have the time to do that sort of stuff.
They don't, and they don't have the money to do that. And the fact that they paid £100 instead of £3,500 was the reason we managed to get so many people there. You know, and I convinced Dalesford Organic and you know, Tyrrell's Crisps, you know, this was back when William Chase was still a potato farmer, to give me enough money to have those people there. And that was just purely from the passion. I was obviously, you know, and I don't really take no for an answer. You know, the fact that they were willing to, because they were those farmers, you know, years before that, before they were bigger, that was why that model worked, and that was why that festival worked, and why it was so extraordinary was because those farmers could afford to do that from a resource perspective and an economic perspective. But the fact that they got to tell their story to 40,000 consumers and, you know, 100-odd trade, some of those people are still in Fortnum and Masons today, and that makes me really, you know, really chuffed that we were some small part of having some ethical and sustainable brands in front of people, you know.
What have you seen, before we sort of get back to your journey and the next steps, but what have you seen that was 10 years ago? 12 years ago?
2008.
12, 13 years ago. You know, what's your sense of what's changed now? You know, are things the same? You know, farmers still growing food and still have to get other people to do it? Are farmers improving on their marketing? Like, what you know, where's that scene up to now?
I think farmers are definitely more aware of the fact that they need the marketing. I don't think that necessarily ensures that it happens, for all the reasons we talk about, resources, you know, there's only so much time in the day, and there's all of those things. But creating a brand as a farmer, if you want to be a regenerative farmer, smaller farmer, ethical farmer, whatever you want to call it, creating a brand is really important if you want to go direct to consumer and not be a commodity. I think there's a difference. I think if you're going to be a commodity farmer, then having the brand, you know, it doesn't really matter maybe. But if you want to be a direct to consumer farmer and part of that whole system, then having a brand is as important, I think, as the product itself.
Totally, and being able to sell the sizzle, not just the sausage.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more going on in Australia. Well, I'm not, again, you know, I'm not familiar with overseas. I see it, and it's active, and things have been a bit slow in the last 12 months, of course, because they just haven't had the influx of people to support them from other countries and the cross-pollination. But there's certainly more of those events around. Like right now in Adelaide or in the area in South Australia, there's Tasting Australia is on.
Yep. There's definitely. I mean, we owe that, I guess, in large to consumers being more savvy. The consumer back in 2008 when we first did that. That was the start of really, I think, this local food movement. This consumers wanting to know where their food came from, as opposed to just, it was almost the end of people wanting to eat fancy food and people just wanting to eat food where it had a story. It was the start of that in the UK, and then like a lot of things, Australia, it happens. By the time I moved back to Australia in 2011, it felt like it was just starting here. So it was kind of like I got two waves of that extraordinary foundational being part of something that felt a little bit revolutionary. Even though it's not revolutionary, we're not creating anything new here, we're not reinventing any wheels. It is a cycle. This sort of stuff happens all the time, but I've felt like I've been lucky enough to be part of it sort of twice over, and have my time again to relearn something and be part of that, which is quite extraordinary. But I think that sort of local food movement, wanting to know where your food comes from, that hasn't disappeared. That's only gotten stronger since 2008, definitely.
Well, as I say, no one's walking into the grocery store going, "Hey, can you get more of that GMO corn in, please?
Please can I have some more of that, more. I love corn syrup on everything. Please can I have a little bit more in there?
The lettuce has been sprayed 12 times.
I love 40,000 SKUs to choose from. Please put it all there.
And that's really positive, because they're not doing that. They're going, no, I want more organic stuff. I want more clean stuff. I want to know where it's from.
Totally. And that whole Michael Pollan saying about shopping in the exterior of the supermarket, it's never been truer. Or if your grandmother didn't recognise it as food, then it's not food. It hasn't been truer, that staying away from processed stuff, all of that stuff, they're all those little granules of almost perfect sound bites that stick in your head, for the rest of the time.
They resonate. Tell me, who were some of your favourite, I guess they can be, or they turn into celebrities because of the popularity and they just resonate with people. But who are some of your favourite people you worked with in that time?
Alice Waters is an extraordinary woman. She's definitely Dorina Allen.
So Alice at Chez Panisse.
Alice Waters, she's the owner of Chez Panisse and founder of. She was a big part of Slow Food USA, and in its starting days, Edible Schoolyard program in the US. Extraordinary woman, extraordinary educator. Just has this beautiful, gentle way of expressing importance, and just sticks with you. And then you've got Dorina Allen, who I've worked with. Haven't been able to go because COVID, but usually go over there at least once a year and teach at Ballymaloe Cookery School, which is one of my favourite places on the planet. In Ireland, in County Cork.
Wow, cool.
Dorina is like the slow food god of Ireland, so she's like the Alice of. So you've kind of got, Alice Waters is the US, Dorina is Ireland. You've got Maggie and Stephanie Alexander here in Australia. They're all sort of these grandmothers of the sustainable food movement, and they're all my absolute heroes. Rodney Dunn and Sev down at the Agrarian Kitchen, two of my favourite humans I've ever worked with. I'm lucky enough to teach at the Agrarian, and their authenticity and integrity in what they do, in everything they do.
In Tassie
is just one of, they're two of my favourite people as well. And their potato fritters are pretty bloody good at the Agrarian Eatery. They're one of my death row meals. Yeah, I'm not even kidding.
You're probably not the only one.
Costa from Gardening Australia is one of my best mates and my hero. Every time I do something, I go, would Costa be proud of me? And if Costa would be proud of me, then I'll continue on my way. That man is everything. To me, he is my pedestal. He's he's my benchmark of being a good human on this planet and what I can give, not take, you know. So him, you know, and then you've got the Eric Schossels and the Michael Pollan's and the Tim Langs and, you know, all of those amazing writers who express in a way that, you know, I think some people are readers and some people are not. And the people that are readers that can get from a book what I have to get from being with people, those guys, you know, the Bruce Pascoes, you know, the Charles Masseys, all of those farmer, regenerative, activist types are just people that really resonate with me. Dan Barber, in the US, his book The Third Plate really just rocked me. I've been out to the farm as well in New York when I was at Yale last year or the year before. Everything's a bit of a blur. And spent some time out there, and what they're doing out there is extraordinary. Oh my God, there's so many amazing people that just inspire me and that I've been lucky enough to work with over the years. Hugh Fernley-Whittingstall, you know, I'm lucky enough to teach at River Cottage in the UK pre-COVID.
Get out of here.
Pre-COVID.
Wow.
So Hugh is a bit of a hero of mine. Rachel DeThample, who's my best friend in London, she teaches at River Cottage and is an incredible author. You know, people in my everyday life are my heroes. You know, she's an incredible human. I'm lucky. I'm surrounded by them, and they're all my. If they'd be proud of me and what I'm doing, then I continue on my way. You know.
You must be doing something right, because those people don't have to like you or don't have to hang around and work with you.
Like me.
You know? No, that's a real credit to you. It's not so much about pumping up your tyres. It's about, you know, the passion that you show and what you contribute, what you give, is resonating with people, and they want, you know, you're assisting them, because you're not necessarily, you know, farming and growing lots of this or lots of that, but you're that bit that's such an integral part of the system, not the system, but of that process, of that path, that journey of food, you know. And it needs people like you and others to do that, because not everyone's got the skills, not everyone's got the time, and it is important, isn't it? It's not just like commodity, grow this, sell that, eat it, it's fuel, don't care.
I think that's a really good point there. That, you know, surround yourself by people that are good at the stuff you're shit at, you know. And it takes all of us for this regenerative agriculture, sustainability, this food movement, this whatever we want to call it, to exist. You know, we can't all just be farmers. We can't all just be feeders. Yeah. You know, what my dream would be that every chef that existed in the world spent some time as a farmer, and every farmer that existed in the world spent some time as a chef or as a cook. Because how much could we all learn if we knew the end or the beginning, you know, if we weren't just the chicken or the egg, so to speak, you know, if we knew what the farmer wanted and the farmer knew what the chef wanted, and they knew how much time it took for both of those things, I don't think we pay the true cost of food at all. But if a chef had spent that time in the farm doing it from scratch, they'd understand the true cost of food, and vice versa, you know. I don't think the consumer knows the true cost of food. I think the supermarkets have done us wrong with these price wars and these 2-for-1s and these, you know, perfect sized everything. They've taken the reality out of food, and you know, we all want cheap food, and that's at detriment to us ultimately from a environmental perspective and a health perspective.
Well, that's my next question. Now, who or what is actually paying for that food? You know, what is footing the bill?
Well, our health, our health and our planet. You know, that's what's fitting the bill. They're the ones paying. We're going to pay for it eventually. You know, whether it's because we've got health problems because we're eating nothing but processed shit, because we can't afford vegetables, because we're not paying the true cost of food, or we can't grow any more food in this region because everything's to shit, the soil's to shit, because we've taken full advantage of it and pillaged it to death. You know, ultimately, so it's going to come and hit our pocket, whether it's my generation or my son's generation, you know, that pay that price. But if we keep going the way we're going and don't pay the true price for food, then we're all screwed, really. I mean, if you look at other countries, you know, some countries 54% of their salary goes on food. It's something like, it's less than 10% in Australia, I think. Don't get me wrong and don't hold me to that figure because I'm not sure, but I know it's minuscule. You know, once upon a time, I know my grandmother's generation spent a huge proportion of their salaries on food. We do not. There's something wrong with that.
We're spending it on consumables, not our mouths, it's going through our ears or our eyes or our heads.
Absolutely. Big screen TVs and broken iPhones, you know, that we could probably fix.
Joel Salatin has been known to say, you know, you got a choice. You either pay the farmer now or the doctor later.
Yeah, 100%. I went to his farm a couple of years ago and spent some time.
Get out of here.
Yeah. I was lucky. I was doing a fellowship at the Smithsonian Museum in DC, and I was there in 2014 for 4 months working, and lucky enough I was working in their food history department, so I rang Joel. I met Joel when he'd been over here, and went and spent some time down there, and what he's doing on a small amount of land, you know, I mean, that for me, and that whole, you know, him being a bioterrorist, when you get there and go and see his neighbours, you'll understand why they think he is that way. I mean, it's extraordinary, but everything he says, you know, I'm the same. I'd rather be a lunatic farmer and be a known as a bioterrorist and live on this property that is green than, you know, some of the properties around me, for sure.
I've got a little Hugh Fearnley Wedding Store fanboy moment. I was in LA lounge. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this in another interview, but I'll do it again anyway. In the lounge in LA, waiting to come back from the US with my family, and sat in the lounge. It was a bit of a temporary thing at the time, so it was quite sort of squished up and everything. Anyway, sat down, you know, end of the long trip and last leg home to Australia, and I look up and I went, oh my God, that is Hugh Fearnley Wedding Store right across the little thing there. And his hair was quite short now. He used to have it quite long. Yeah. Anyway, and I was all fidgety and weird and just like going, oh my God. And then I was like doing these eyes, like little thumb things, and she's worked it out. She's going, oh my God. Anyway, Persia, my daughter, she was going, she said to me, oh, Charlie, what's he doing? Because I was all fidgety and weird. Anyway, I got my sort of business card and put it in my pocket, and I was sitting there, and I went, oh God, this is a once in a lifetime chance. Yeah. So I introduced myself and said hello and said I'm a bit of a fan, and you know, took a photo and had a 5-minute chat. Lovely, lovely guy. Anyway, I didn't think much more of it, just that I was just in awe and going, because I love his stuff. He's just his personality and what he's just everything about him is just amazing. Anyway, got back to Australia and a few months went by, and then I can't quite remember what the order of service was, but anyway, he had, you know, and he didn't have to, as a sort of kind of guy he is, he'd given my card to someone, and that person, or maybe himself, had contacted Nani Dwyer, who worked as one of his sort of executive or sous chefs in England. And she got in touch with me, or I got in touch with her or something, I can't quite remember, but it was beautiful. And then we chatted, and then now she's doing some amazing things with sort of her bread, you know, gluten-free bread, and such a lovely girl. And I was just like, wow, he didn't have to do that. You know, he just ran with some random sort of fanboy in the airport.
And that's why he's still around as well, you know. That's why River Cottage is an institution, because it is, because of that. Because he's that leadership, you know.
And he started Instagram only a couple of months ago. Yeah. And like overnight he had bazillion followers.
Of course he did.
But I guess he'd resisted for so long. Yeah. And he goes swimming every morning in a freezing pond and all that sort of stuff.
And he does. And that place, River Cottage, is, you know, it's magic. It's not just the TV. It's a genuinely magic place, and that comes from leadership, and we need, you know, that leadership, that kind of leadership, that empowering kind of leadership, you know, because obviously he's not there every day anymore, you know, and that's the reality. But his team, all of his team at that place, you know, Stuart, who is one of the owners of River Cottage, who's also an architect, incredible. They're all as passionate and enthusiastic and give a shit. Everyone that works there gives a shit, and that's the important thing. You know, hiring those people that are good at the shit that you're not good at. But at the end of the day, if you don't have people that have the same values and morals and integrity and authenticity as you, then you know it's nothing.
It's a good point. I mean, you got to have similar character, not similar character, but certainly similar values, but different skills.
Yes.
I guess that's the important thing.
Yep.
Talk about skills. You just mentioned leadership, a word that probably don't use enough generally. Who are some of the, I guess, more at home here in Australia, who, given that we haven't been anywhere for 12 more months, who are sort of in your eye leaders in your world at the moment that you're supporting, you're seeing sort of coming up through the ranks?
My leaders are at the moment those people that my mum and my partner and my very close to home people at the moment, because I don't I'm not getting to go anywhere. No, this is a person who I was on a plane every few weeks, which I also have issues with from a carbon footprint perspective, but the work I was doing was really important, so that's a bit of a whole other topic there. But there are so many amazing people in Australia, so many amazing people. In South Australia, I've got people right here in my community like Ella and Chris at Little Bunyip have just put in a 2,000 wattle seed orchard, 2,000 trees, wattle seed orchard. We've got people like Felissa Anderson out in Byron, who's incredible. She's just been head down, bum up, doing her thing for years and years and years. Obviously you've got Rod and Sev down in Tassie. You've got there's so many amazing people doing amazing things, and I don't think. And these are just people that are just head down, just doing their thing in their little community. And I think if I can say there's anything positive out of COVID, is that people are working closer to home in their community because they can't go anywhere, and they realise the importance of working in their own community and the impact it can have doing it in your own community. And that takes me to a little aha moment that happened that I didn't realise at the time, that I sort of went, oh yeah. And it was Alice Waters who said to me, because I wanted to create my granny skills program and create this model that would be replicated all over the world, and I was blah blah blah, and Alice was like, do it in your community, do it well, create a model, and everyone else will come and take it and do it in their own community. That's the only way you're going to have anything successful. And at the time I sort of like, my itchy pants self was like,
take over the world.
And now that couldn't be truer. And now that's exactly what I'm doing.
So let's get to that. Back to your journey, amazing events overseas, making a mark in the world, and you came home at some point.
Yeah, I did, with a really awful boyfriend. That's a whole other story. We need a different podcast for that with a different title.
What's a relationship? I don't know.
Oh, God, I think he just wanted a visa, put it that way.
Degenerative journey, maybe.
The degenerative, exactly. He was, oh, God, that's a whole other, that's a different podcast, and that's a different time slot. So, what happened is, I lost my great-grandmother, Lil, and she was 100 when she passed away, and this was around 2008-9, and when she passed away, I realised I had this other aha moment, which was that my mum kept me a little box of her things, a little shoebox, and she came to London on a trip and gave me this box. And so I go scurrying through this box, hoping for a diamond or an inheritance check or something. None of that. But what was in there was this little stack of certificates and this little medal. And it turned out my great-grandmother was this award-winning baker in the 30s.
Wow.
In the Women's Own competition, which is like Women's Day, but in the UK. So she's a London woman, Cockney, 4'11", absolute presence in a room of a woman, total matriarch of our family. And so the certificate, she was this award-winning baker for her Victoria sponge. And in that moment, I'm not only heartbroken because she's gone, I'm also, my heart shatters like nothing else, because I went, shit, I work in food. I didn't even know she could cook. I don't know how to make that Victoria sponge. What the...
Yeah.
So my aha moment is I did not spend enough time with my great-grandmother. I didn't know any of her stories. I had none of her traditions passed down to me. I cannot be the only person that has regret. So that was the start of this granny skills idea, that plus having worked with Alice and Michael Pollan and hearing these little plants of nuggets of information around, if your great-grandmother doesn't recognise it as food, it's not. Our land girls, our most sustainable generation was my grandmother's, and that's not because they were hipsters and it was trendy to eat locally and seasonally. That's because they had no bloody choice. It was complete necessity. And so if I think to the most sustainable generation thus far, for me, it's my grandmother. They were frugal. They didn't waste food. And they still don't, because that was a habit that was formed at an important point in time and a habit that has stuck. So if you look at all of those women and men, they could all grow food. They could all, you know, mostly. I mean, some of them were shit cooks. Let's not get me wrong. But that's why I started the Granny Skills movement, because the idea was that if we lived more like our grandmother's generation, we would be more sustainable and we would be in a much better place, health-wise, community-wise, because we'd probably know our neighbours because they had a lemon tree and I wanted some lemons, or they had some apricots and I could swap it. You know, that was that beautiful way of living, that thrifty, frugal way that we now want to live. You know, and my nan didn't have a man bun, I can tell you that right now. She was not a hipster and still is not a hipster. She thinks she is. But, you know, so I started this Granny Skills movement in the UK by, firstly, I started the London Wandsworth branch of the WI. I was the youngest founding president of the Women's Institute, which is like the CWA in the UK.
And that had been around for a while.
Yep, long time.
Yeah, right.
And I remember sitting in Royal Albert Hall at the big annual general meeting and seeing the sea of grey. and one of the women next to me goes, "You are definitely the youngest member we've ever had."
Yeah.
And from now there's tons of young WIs all over London. And CWA over here too, I think. Yeah, totally. And that was because I wanted to learn how to make bloody jam in a Victoria sponge, because I didn't learn how to make it, and I did. But that was foundationally what started the Granny Skills movement, and because I wanted to live like that generation. So then I moved back to Australia, and this Granny Skills idea became more of a, right, I don't want it to be a nice fluffy idea, let's all be grannies, you know, get some granny skills. I founded a CWA branch in North Adelaide, started doing a PhD in the topic, and I wrote my first book, which was called Like Grandma Used to Make, and that was in 2013. And that sort of all started that journey, which was this Granny Skills idea, which I still sort of is a big part of my work today. It's just through a different avenue, and that's now through Wandu.
So let's go to that then. Is there anything in the between coming back, setting that up, and Wandu? Is there something?
Yeah. So
there's actually a whole lot there.
Yeah, I wrote a few more books. I wrote 5 more books on natural living, so the art of the natural home series. Yeah. Because what I realised, it wasn't just food the way our grandmothers lived; it was everything. You know, my nan cleaned with salt and lemon and bicarb, and if I'm going to, you know, put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, I can't just be existing in this tiny monocultural food world. It has to be my whole being.
Homesteading,
homesteading,
way, isn't it?
completely.
More of a US word.
It is a US word, but it's such a good word, you know. Right. And so I started running workshops and teaching people how to make cleaning products and skincare products, and did a bit of TV and writing and, you know, all sorts of amazing work. And then I met Damien.
How long ago was that?
So that was 8 years, and no, we're not married. That's another podcast.
Stop. Okay. Your friend, your male friend.
Yeah, I know, my man friend.
Hey, I'm going to have one of those.
Yeah, eat the hags. We love hags. Yeah, sure. I don't know if I can eat with my mouth full, but
so good.
So I met Damien, and this was probably my biggest aha moment, and that is because he taught me. He didn't teach me, but I learned that I was a bit of a hypocrite. So here's this girl who's been standing on a soapbox, getting arrested, telling everyone to eat local food for the best part of 10 years. I live in Australia and I never tried local food.
Local food.
Local, truly local food. You cannot exist in a world where you are a local food eater, locavore, whatever you want to call yourself, if you've not tried anything that's indigenous to your own country. So I'd had kangaroo once, and that was when my French friends cooked it for me because they ate it all the time when they lived here. Of course they did.
Yeah, because it was exotic and exciting.
Well, because to them it was local. Why wouldn't I eat kangaroo if it's from here? And so they cooked it, and I'd never had lemon myrtle, and I didn't know what wattle seed was. And I have this spice pantry in my own back garden, and these superfoods in my own back garden, and I never tried them. And so here I am, I meet Damien, who's indigenous, and I felt like a massive freaking hypocrite.
Did he say something to you, or you just went, "Oh my god"? It sort of was dawned on you.
It was just a huge moment of, and it was because I basically made him go out with me.
Or with cable ties around his wrist. A pillow.
That's a different podcast. So effectively, I said I'd like to cook you dinner, and I wanted to cook him something special, and so he also has Sri Lankan heritage. So I made him curry, but using native Australian spices. And at the time, I was actually living with two guys who worked for then Arnott, so I was starting to get into native foods. I was a bit excited by them, but it was all around the same time I met Damien, so it was this feeling like a hypocrite for more ways than one because of this native food stuff. And I cooked him this meal, and he hadn't had much of the stuff that I'd cooked either. So I just sort of went, oh my God, like, I have to do something about this. And then, you know, time went on, and I kept working in and around granny schools, and people used to ask him what I did for a living, and he'd go, I don't know, she bloody hangs out with grannies or something. I still don't really know what she does for a living. And it wasn't until in 2014 when I was in America, in DC, working at the Smithsonian, and Damien's pop got passed away. And he'd been diagnosed with dementia about a year before that, and went very quickly. And we both then together had this aha moment when he went, oh shit, I get why you're protecting these granny skills now. And I just lost my pop, who I'll never have anything scribbled down on a piece of paper, because for him everything was passed down orally. I had all the recipes scribbled down in the book, and we went, shit, what are we going to do about this?
So there was a common objective or catalyst there in a way.
Totally. And that was, we have to protect his culture and his language. And Damien always talks about, if you lose the food, you lose the language. If you lose the language, you lose the food. Yeah. And in particular, if you lose the language, you lose the food. And so we started Wandu with this mission of championing Australian native ingredients and protecting culture through something that everyone does 3 times a day, if they're lucky enough, and that is eating. And so we just started with a really simple tea brand, because we figured lots of these ingredients are going to be like they were to me, which was shit. I've never even tried them, and I work in food. Yeah. So we started it with herbal teas, and we, now have a home and body range as well. But our mission has always been the same, and that is to regenerate culture, community, tradition, health, and soil, and through these beautiful Australian native foods and botanicals. And the soil is one of the most important components for us, and that is because if we don't have these plants in the soil, then our soil's fucked, basically. Yep, we need these plants to exist here in Australia, and we need them for more than just environment. We need them for culture as well. And so we created this brand, and kind of it's been going since about 2014. And it's only really been since I got back from Yale that I've really felt comfortable in the brand. And that is because I helped create a brand that to me is an Indigenous owned company. But it was, to me, I had a bit of resentment, I think is safe to say, because I felt like this white girl who created this brand that was championing Damien's culture and not my own. And it wasn't until I spent all this time at Yale in this leadership program as a World Fellow, which I was so grateful to have been chosen out of like 3,000 people and one of the first Australians to spend this time among leaders in their own fields. And the founder of Patagonia, the amazing brand Patagonia, said to me, when I did some mentor, he did some mentoring for me, and I took one of his classes, and he said to me, I sense resentment in what you've created. And I said, I just feel bad being the white girl talking about native food, right? And he said, have you ever considered that you've created a co-culture brand? And that was this light bulb for me. I ring Damien and he goes, have you not been, I've been telling you that for like 4 years, that it's a co-culture brand.
Yeah.
I just think I couldn't hear it. Sometimes it takes a real outsider to say something to you that makes you go, oh yeah. You know, sometimes when your partner is down, you know,
totally,
you shut down. We all do it. So we have this co-culture brand, you know, it's my culture, it's his culture, it's our son's culture that we're championing.
Because I mean, your son, he is co-culture.
He is co-culture,
isn't he?
He is.
Yeah.
Yep, he absolutely is, and we, you know, that I don't feel like that white girl standing up there now, feeling like I'm doing the wrong thing, which I did for a really long time, because I'm doing things the right way, and I always have my benchmark, and that's Damien. You know, if I'm offending or saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing culturally, he'll put me up on it in a heartbeat, you know, and then I learn from it. And surely that's the important thing, right? Is doing things with integrity and authenticity and asking permission and learning and sharing, you know, and now I'm just so proud of what we've created. And this is my local food system, you know, and if I'm going to work in the local food movement, it has to include the local food.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that, you know, people, I'm sure, you know, using the word co-culture, that, you know, for some would be offended because they would perceive you combining, you know, co-creating with different cultures as offensive to the indigenous culture. You know, go, well, you're bastardising it, you're cross-pollinating it, or you're diluting it, or you're, you know, that is my sense, given some conversations we've sort of touched on, and what I sort of see in the world is this sort of, it's a really interesting thing, isn't it? This sort of, call it cultural appropriation, call it, I don't even know what to call it, but it's sort of, I think it's a symptom of something that I don't know is very good. You know, this sort of, can we talk about that?
I think, how can I not be talking about this culture when my son is indigenous? Like, how can I not be proud? Like, how can I not want to champion that? I want him to grow up as a proud indigenous boy. I want him to champion this. If he's not going to get that from his mum and his dad, I don't want him to be proud of my culture too, you know? If he can't get that from his parents, then where on earth is he going to get permission to be that person in the world?
And he's not as though he in his life, or you as mum, or Damien as dad, is ignoring or putting down or putting aside the other culture.
Yeah.
This is you know, that's not what you're doing or saying, but it's interesting that some people just jump on that and go, you're on the bandwagon, you're being disrespectful, you're appropriating a culture, and you don't have the right to do it.
Yep. You know? And don't get me wrong, I've gotten that, you know, I've copped it. I have. But surely I'm not sharing anything that I've never had permission to share. I'm fighting my booty off to protect the IP of these foods and these botanicals for our Indigenous people. I'm not trying to own it. No one owns, you know.
Can't own it.
I'm not trying to own it. I'm trying to support a system whereby our Indigenous knowledge is so important for our planet to exist. And I mean that in any country whereby Indigenous peoples we're talking about. You know, when I was at Yale, I had the same conversations with Native Americans with Ecuadorian indigenous peoples, the same thing has happened everywhere in the world. And we all need to be aware of that. And we all need to, if the rest of Australia isn't aware of the issues, then we can't do anything to protect it. We can't protect the IP of these foods if people don't know that there is a problem to start with. And if we don't all talk about it, then how does anyone know? You know, it's like that. I talk about this moment where I finally got the courage to ask Damien's dad about his culture. It took me 6 months to ask about anything to do with Aboriginality or anything, because I felt embarrassed and ashamed of the fact that I didn't know anything. Because I grew up without learning language at school, without knowing, you know, what country I was on, without knowing anything about Aboriginal anything. You know, I had Aboriginal friends growing up, but I still didn't know anything, and it was so embarrassing for me to sit in this room. It's like an elephant in a room, and I feel like a lot of Australians feel like this, that we're so embarrassed that we don't know anything that we just don't say anything at all. We just ignore it, and that is the worst thing we can do. Surely it's better to ask a question and feel like a dick and say the wrong thing and be corrected and then learn from it than to not say anything at all, and then we never make any progress. So I finally got the courage to talk to Damien's dad, and it was a food question because I know food, and then he started talking about something. Now Damien's dad and I have bonded over food. Damien's dad is reconnected to food. Damien's dad, when he's out working out bush, will find stuff that he remembers from his childhood, and he'll bring it and share it with me and Damien, because he's now almost got this, not permission, but this place to reconnect with culture. Damien has not reconnected with culture, but is more connected with culture than when I met him 8 years ago, because of this thing we've created, this important thing that we've created. And so have some of Damien's family members. Not, you know, that just happened naturally, but because I finally put my bullshit aside and went, all right, say the wrong thing and learn from it, you know.
It's a good point. The awkwardness and the embarrassment and the not knowing quite how to approach it. I mean, I'm sure, you know, some people just don't give a shit at all, and it's like, you know, I'm happy with the meat and 3 veg and that whole world of...
And that's fine too.
That's fine too. But for those that are sort of looking to step into that space, for whatever reason, and I was, you know, referenced this more recently, early this year, was privy to a gathering of indigenous people and elders up in the Northern Rivers in New South Wales, and, you know, privy to some ritual and ceremony that I hadn't seen before, and it was just a beautiful thing. There was, you know, a couple 100 people there or so, and it was based around the regenerative sacred regenerative, you know, as part of the National Regenerative Agriculture Day events. And, you know, I stood there at one point and just said I feel really underqualified as a farmer in Australia to talk about agriculture. You know, it hadn't dawned on me before, but it was the reverence, the ritual, and we weren't even in a paddock or anything. We were in a town hall. Yeah. You know, we weren't there eating anything. It was just, wow, there's a whole lot of stuff I don't know, and I had a sense of embarrassment and you know, awkwardness and really underqualified, you know, which became a new reference point for me. And so, you know, conversations have ensued and some, you know, some friendships forming at the moment, you know, that I trust will develop. And one we had Paul House, who's from Canberra, from that area of you know, Australia, and he indigenous fellow who's lovely man. He came to Hanamino in Wiradjuri country there where we are, and he welcomed us to country. He showed us some beautiful things. You know, we got stringy bark and made some twine, you know, and he did a little ceremony. It was just beautiful, and had my kids there and Ange, and it was just a wonderful thing. And it was still a sense of being underqualified and not so much embarrassment's the wrong word, but just sort of humbled and going, oh God, I just don't know this stuff. And I walk that ground and I see those stringy barks and I see the you know, the spear grass, and you could make this beautiful thread out of spear grass, almost like string, and these things, and it was you know, it was meant to happen. Murray Pryor, lovely fellow there at Nauru Farm near Yass, you know, he really introduced me to Paul, and you have to thank Murray for that introduction. But it was time.
Yeah.
You know, it was time that I learnt these things and this whole different perspective of what's there. So much more to learn.
We've got the most sophisticated agricultural learnings on the planet. You know, you've got tens of thousands of years of people keeping a land going, and thousands of plants, edible plants and animals and proteins and nuts and seeds. I mean, they're not still here without there having been something pretty special in place before it.
Healthy food.
And a race doesn't exist 70,000 years later if it's not bloody good for you, you know. And I always talk about the fact that, you know, we're willing to spend $30, and I was saying this to you earlier, we're willing to spend $30 on a bag of goji berries flown halfway across the world, but we won't spend $30 on a bag of Davidson plum that has more antioxidants than said berry, is local, truly local, and starts a cultural conversation for us about that particular indigenous people that grew that and harvested that and, you know, ate it to protect them from colds and flus, you know.
Because they knew.
Because they knew. You know, how you know, we've got a pantry in our back garden full of superfoods, and we'd rather buy them from somewhere else.
We don't need to go overseas.
No, we don't.
I just want to sort of, from your experience, you know, for people, I mean, I guess not unlike myself, who are looking to, you know, step into understanding Indigenous culture more and engaging with Indigenous people, and really, you know, to not just to take information or to really understand and go, oh, I'm just going to do this at home, but also contribute, you know, and there to be transaction's the wrong word, but there to be a relationship that is mutually beneficial in a really positive and culturally significant way. You know, how do we do? How do us whiteys do that? You know.
Well, I think you've got to start in your own community, right? You've got to meet people, and you've got to build you can't just swan in and be like, oh, I want to learn about native food because I want to set up a, you know, nutritionist practice and be able to use these herbs and stuff to make people better. It doesn't work like that, you know. This is, we have to build relationships for the right reasons, to learn and to share. But remember that we only share what we're allowed to share. You know, these are practices that have been passed down orally for tens of thousands of years. And there's some seriously shit things happened in the last 200 years, you know, where trust has been broken, and we've got a lot of trust to get back in this, you know, in this co-culture existence. And we've got to remember that different cultures do things differently, right? And the beautiful thing I find about, and there's also hundreds of different Aboriginal cultures within Aboriginal Australia and Torres Strait Islander Australia. We can't forget that. And each of those have their own cultural practices, their own language, their own foods. So that's why it makes our world smaller when we think of it that way, because we actually have to learn about our own Aboriginal nation of the country that we live on. We can't just go, oh, I'm going to learn about Aboriginal culture, full stop. It doesn't work like that. So it's really quite nice that it can make your community, make you look within your community when you're learning, and I think that's the best place to start, you know. And there are loads of amazing groups. There are rangers you can talk to. There are land care groups that you can talk to. There are local, you know, native title bodies. Just reach out, you know, try and just, I think if you do things with the right heart space and the right integrity, that's obvious when learning and sharing, and it's the same in any culture or any transfer of knowledge, you know. If you're just a taker, people figure that out pretty quickly, you know. If you just come in to take something, you know, people are going to see straight through it. But I think plants are a really good way to start. Find your local native nursery. They're going to be able to point you in the right direction for sure. And that's a really good start. Grow something, at home, whether you live on the land like we're lucky enough to, or in an apartment. We used to grow native foods in our apartment in Bowden, right in the middle of Adelaide. We had 10 different things growing on our balcony, and I found going to native nurseries was the best way to, the easiest way to learn, to start to learn, and to learn how to connect with Indigenous groups. Going to events, if there's a festival on that's got stallholders, go to these events, talk to people. They're a really great place to start. Going to events that share and celebrate Aboriginal culture or art, or you might not necessarily be able to start with food, but you can start with art, and that's going to lead you in the right direction. But start with your community, start in your own neighbourhood. Learn a few words, learn what country you're on, start using what country you're on, when you write your address, just little things like that make such a difference. Make an effort. It's no different to going to France and walking into a bakery and saying, "Hi, I want a baguette,"
Yeah.
Learn to say bonjour, learn to say merci,
Yeah.
Exactly. Just make a bloody effort. Don't be embarrassed that you don't know anything. Mess up, learn from it.
Is there any sort of, I say, general etiquette that sort of applies? I mean, etiquette's a bit of a vague word as well, but that because that's for me, and it's Hamish Mackay, a biodynamic, educator, and stoked that you're coming to our course tomorrow, you and Damo. He's I wouldn't say he's well versed, but he certainly is understanding and considerate of that. Is there any sort of general, again, I'm using the word etiquette, that one could be good if they had some understanding of that, just the words you use, or the approach, or I don't know, maybe there isn't, maybe it's just all too broad. But
I think the thing to consider is what country you live on, and always having in the back of your mind that one size does not fit all. We have hundreds of different nations and different dialects within those different nations, so learning how to say hello and thank you and what country you're on is a beautiful start. Teaching your kid that, asking at your local, at your kids' primary school, do they sing a welcome to country and language? Do they learn language? Planting a bush tucker garden in the local school, engaging with some local TOs, some local traditional owners to come and help with that, and just being respectful. Like I said, it's no different to going to another country and being respectful. Just remember that you've got hundreds of different countries in your own country, and go forth like you would if you went to Italy or France or Spain or, Latvia,
And we're on country here. I looked at it and just, I wasn't sure how to pronounce W. It starts with W, doesn't it?
No.
N.
M?
N?
N. Yeah. We're in Nadri country.
Oh, maybe I was in something.
Nebraska?
Maybe I was in Nebraska. Oh, no.
Don't worry.
Say it again.
Nadri.
Oh, I must have got that.
It's NJUD.
Oh, no, I've got that totally wrong then.
Don't worry.
That's not cool.
It's learning.
It is learning. And just about being on country as well. When Paul House was at our place at Burrawa, and that was fascinating because he said Burrawa to me was I was taught that Burrawa was plain turkey, and he said, oh, it's also, I'm not sure it's also or it actually is fog over there, and that was for me like a lifetime of that just turned on its head. And he also said, which was one of the most beautiful parts of the time he spent with us, was he spoke the language. He spoke his Wiradjuri language there, or dialect. I guess it might have been more, and that just blew my mind in the first place. And then as we sort of finished, and the sun was setting, and we were getting all packed up, and we were chatting about it after. He said, "Oh, you might get some visits now." Because that was probably the first time in 100 to maybe 150, 200 years, God knows how long, that language was heard by that land. Wow. And it was just, I went, oh my God,
bigger than us, isn't it?
Yeah,
so much bigger than us.
Just even contemplating the the spirits. Well, I mean, there's lots of different spirit and nature and elemental spirits, but the sort of the people, indigenous spirits of that land, were potentially awoken because they heard their language, you know, and that was just a beautiful thing. You know?
Damien's Adnyamathanha and Diri. So his grandmother was Diri and his pop was Adnyamathanha. So the Flinders Range is the rock people, and I hear him, Damien's dad and uncles and aunties speaking the language all the time, and it's just seriously beautiful. So we're trying to find someone to teach us the language, you know, properly, so that Mally will learn it. And so we just use, you know, words every now and then to reiterate the words for him. But we're really hoping to be able to learn the language in full before it's gone, you know.
I think there's a website that is, I have to look it up now. I can't remember. I think it was Paul House I was speaking with about, with someone else, and there was a I'm trying to remember where I picked this up on. There was an organisation that is, you know, sort of, I guess, collecting or sort of, you know, collecting the language, different languages, and so they're not lost. You know,
there
collating.
Lots of amazing people out there doing incredible work around language, and we're lucky enough to have the dictionary, the Adnyamathanha dictionary. So we will always be, you know, have that, if anything. But we just really, there used to be these immersion sort of camps where you go out to the Flinders for 6 weeks at a time and just only speak language, and we're trying to see if that will happen again, so that we can take Mally when he's speaking and just immerse ourselves in it for 6 weeks at a time. But yeah, they're the weirdest thing in the world. When I was at Yale, was I got chummy with one of the linguistics professors there, Claire, and she had the Adnyamathanha dictionary, like an online version that no one else has.
Yeah.
They had it at Yale, of all places, because she speaks like 5 different Australian indigenous languages, and she was like, yeah, we put this together here at Yale, and I was like, what?
Wow, at least somebody is, though, you know.
Oh, that's right. Is it? And I remember hearing one of the Adnyamathanha elders, she said to me when we were interviewing her, she said, I would rather some white kids from St. Peter's College in Adelaide come up here and be interested and want to, you know, learn some stuff and pass it on than it'd be lost forever.
Oh, totally.
You know?
Totally.
And there are obviously people that are the opposite of that don't want to pass it down to anyone other than Aboriginal people, and I also respect that. But you know, just hearing her say that to me made me think, okay, well, I have to tread lightly here and go about it the right way. You know, not everyone wants to share it with me or with any other non-Indigenous person, and I get that. So it's about being respectful, having those conversations, you know. It's
the same with the food thing, isn't it, as well? Like that, let's not have that wisdom and that medicine cabinet be lost.
Yes.
You know.
But let's not take advantage of it either.
Totally.
You know, and that's where that fine line exists of the way we talk about our products and what they do or what they were used for. We tend to talk less about what they were used for and the science of it and the story of it, but not in a direct way that's going to offend or upset or take away from the IP of that food or that botanical, because we've been told it by uncle or auntie or whatever, you know.
It's a fine line between support and exploitation, isn't it?
Totally. And, you know, you've only got to look to what's going on in the commercialisation of the native food industry. When you look at some of the mob, like, that have been in a court battle with Pepsi Cola / Mary Kay Cosmetics for the last almost decade, because Mary Kay Cosmetics are trying to patent the term highest source of vitamin C on the planet for the Kakadu plum or the garbage. Because they use it in their cosmetics and they know how bloody good it is.
Are they Pepsi? Who is it?
Pepsi Cola own Mary Kay Cosmetics.
Is Mary Kay an Australian?
No, it's American.
Oh, right.
And they're trying to patent it. And they have been for years. And they've been in a legal battle behind the scenes, you know, and it's complete and utter. I won't say much because I'll probably get sued next. But you know what I mean? Like, that sort of shit is wrong on all levels.
And it's like that. That screams exploitation, doesn't it?
Yes, and that's the difference, you know. Whereas I talk about Kakadu plum all the time, or gubbinge, because I use it because it's bloody amazing, you know. I take it when I fly, when I land, when I'm feeling run down. It is the highest source of vitamin C on the planet, and it does work. And there was a reason that our Indigenous people ate it just before cold season rolled around. You know, come on.
They know their stuff, don't
Yeah.
they? And for us to, you know, whether it's sort of agricultural practices or the actual plants themselves, would be foolish not to understand. You know, and again, respectfully and appropriately, you know.
But where do we? And this is going to be the issue going forward: is the commercialization of such an amazing plant when it was used for environmental and cultural practices, the harvest of it. So it wasn't it wasn't replanted so that it could be used for that. It was used for two other different reasons that are very different to us using it for medicine or food. And we want to commercialize it. How does that work, you know?
Yeah, so it wasn't traditionally grown to be traded.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Well, I don't know about the trade side of it. That I'm not an expert there, but all I know is, you know, we're commercializing it at the moment, and if it was hard, traditionally, some of the nations would harvest it for a cultural reason.
Okay.
As a cultural practice.
Yep.
And then for environmental reasons or whatever. Okay. Then where is that line drawn of us commercialising it?
What's appropriate to be commercialising it for? Yeah.
Correct. And that's going to be the issue with a lot of these plants and botanicals, you know. And that's why it's so important to involve and make sure the ownership is with our Indigenous people of this stuff, of the IP at the very least. And how do we have more communities involved and more Indigenous employees involved and owners of Indigenous businesses involved, etc., so that those practices aren't lost or forgotten or pushed to the side so that we can commercialise something.
Is the government lending any support to this sort of thing?
It's a bit of a double-edged sword. Is that a different podcast?
We've got about 6 new ones that we'll cover.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
There are some good things going on. There's some shit things going on.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
we're in this period where what we do next is going to set the tone and the scene for decades and generations to come. And there's some very important moves to be made and very important decisions to be made by our leaders, our Indigenous leaders, and on how they let this roll.
That sounds like a next good question. What are you irate about at the moment?
Oh God, where do we start? Not having enough sleep.
Yeah,
many things, but I try to be more about. I'm less angry and more keen to see people make little changes. I want to see millions of people make little changes rather than 20 people doing things perfectly in the world, you know. I'm definitely angry that our government hasn't taken more action from climate change is my my baby by way of my master's is in climate change, and everything we're doing moving forward is about creating climate resilient communities through native food and Indigenous knowledge. I'm angry about the fire stuff, about more action not being taken post the last bushfires.
Fires, yeah.
I'm in my local CFS, and you know, we haven't yet taken enough action, I don't think, to use Indigenous knowledge in our fire system in Australia. Ollie Costello and people like that finally getting recognition that they should have been given for a very long time. I'm all for, we're going to do some cultural burning here and hopefully have some amazing elders come and teach and share and work with our local fireys. There are some open-minded people. I wish there was some more. The leadership that was shown in New South Wales during the bushfires was incredible. I wish we had more leaders like that. I'm angry about that no action was taken post that. That frustrates me immensely. I was in Yale, sitting there watching my country burn, you know, while other people in my fellowship group, you know, all of them were from different countries, Syria, Iraq, you know, there was shit going on all over the world, it seemed. There always is, but I was just watching my country burn and feeling angry and helpless and determined for that Indigenous knowledge to be utilised in more than just the food space, you know.
It's an interesting one that is so many different levels.
I'm also irate that you ate all the hags.
Hey, no, because that was my next question about your project, and that's an example of co-culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
On off
No, because I can't talk and eat fruit chocks and
well,
I'll talk at the same time.
So you guys, I just want to get back to bushfires, but I'm going to. Will I not struggle through a Hague's chocolate? and that's got the cake.
They're April chocks. They're not our collaboration, but you had some of that.
But you guys have collaborated in a wonderful example of co-culture.
Totally.
Collaboration.
Yep.
What have you done with them?
So we are doing a 3-year collaboration with Hague's, which is a 100-year-old institution. If you don't know Hague's,
I reckon the best chocolate in the universe. Definitely,
and they're a heritage brand here in South Australia. They've only done 3 or 4 collaborations in 100 years, and we're one of them. And we are working with them to create a series of beautiful chocolates that include our native botanicals. And the first 2 were a Davidson Plum Dark and then finger lime milk. But the whole point of the collaboration is education and story and co-culture and sharing these beautiful things from our back garden in a way that will hopefully inspire curiosity for people. You know, seeing a finger lime on the front packet of a brand like that might make people go, oh, what's a finger lime? Then they might go and learn where a finger lime came from and what the local word for it is and how they can use it, and that they don't need to use Tahitian limes anymore. They can just use, you know, the native one, the finger one. And being able to work with a brand like that is such an institution and so knowledgeable in their worlds, you know, we've learnt so much from them too. And it's incredible, and we're really proud of it. And we're very excited for the next bar that we get to create with them, which I can't say what it is, but it's very exciting.
No. Stay tuned. So the finger limes, you know, you see them now occasionally in nurseries, and you know, I guess that's okay. It's a commercialisation of it. I mean, that's going to end up in someone's backyard.
Yep.
That's kind of, you know, probably replacing a Tahitian or a Kaffir or something, you know, so that's kind of a good thing. But
it's better that it ends up in our backyard than overseas, like Utah and Thailand and Malaysia are some of the biggest growers of finger lime.
Really?
Yeah.
Because we let the seeds go.
Yeah, like oh my God, don't even get, that's a whole other podcast. But and you know, I don't know if you know this, but you know, we were talking about.
Have one.
No, I can't. I'm embarrassed because I was talking before. But you came in and said something about the Banksies this morning when you arrived, and you know, Israel is one of the biggest growers of Australian native flowers in the world because we let our seed go, and now we have to bring them all from overseas.
That's like technology, you know, mechanical, you know, inventions and other digital or, you know, technology with, for whatever reason, funds haven't been available, support hasn't been available, gone offshore, gone gangbusters, would have buy it back. Yeah.
But when intellectual property is involved, IP of the plant, you know, and nothing is going back to its not owners, but it's you know, its rightful place, the source of it, where all the knowledge is, you know, And the fact that, you know, we have to get all these native foods legalised because they're not considered traditional in Australia, that makes me irate. There's another one. Technically technically only 10 of these beautiful native ingredients, native foods that we eat are legal. You know, so we all have to, all of us chefs and cooks and people have to work around loopholes.
What do you mean legal?
Legal.
Legal to buy or use?
Legal to buy, sell, eat.
Because if we use something that's not in that 10, we might kill someone.
That hasn't been scientifically proven, even though 65,000 years later, you know, an elder says, yeah, eat this. How can that not be enough? Did rosemary ever get legalised? Do you know what I mean? Like, did it? I don't know. Maybe it did. So
Parsley.
Call 1-800-300-678.
Well, you know, it's not unlike, it's a good point. It's not unlike, you know, someone gets, dare I say, sick from, you know, COVID vaccination. Yeah, I know it's a predisposed sort of a condition and there's no correlation.
Yeah.
Someone gets crook from, you know, a herbal remedy. Oh no, we can't be having people have this stuff because it might kill them. This is black market. This is
correct.
This is not regulated. We can't have people
like
making those choices.
Kazumazu I was telling you about earlier. It's now black market cheese because it's got mold, maggots in it. You know, it's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. No nonna's ever died of it anywhere.
No, that's right. I mean, it is cray, and again, that's. I mean, you know, that is probably, that's another podcast. Is just, you know, diving into the madness.
Yeah, the madness. You know, my nan would poke a chicken. The juices ran clear. It was cooked. She'd sniff a carton of milk. Not ready to use by date. You know, like we've just all gone mental. We've gone. There's another thing that makes me irate. Sniff your bloody carton of milk. Don't look at the use by date. Open your packet of pork.
Stick your beak in there.
Stick your beak in there. If it makes you vomit on the spot, then chuck it out.
That's
Scrape
right.
the mold off the top, you know?
It's not, especially yogurt. Yogurt lasts for months after.
I know. Oh, God.
All sorts of stuff. I'm a big fan of, I've been known many a time to pull out a bit of meat out of the freezer.
Yeah.
I can't remember when that animal was.
1996.
Yeah, it was 1996. And I say, well, if the Mongolian herders who found that frozen mammoth baby that was 10,000 years old is good enough for them, then it's fine. I remember opening a bottle of peaches with a neighbour years ago, and it was we opened that. We probably opened that bottle 10 years ago. So it was 2010. His mother put that under the house in 1979. Peaches. Well, they were absolutely delicious.
I bet they were. And this is the thing, you know, like, trust your gut, right?
Totally.
Indigenous Australians were the oldest, like, they were fermenting shit, you know. Come on.
And Bruce Pascoe obviously has done a lot of amazing work in that space as well.
Yeah.
And in a beautiful way. I love the way Bruce, you know, it's not so much let bygones be bygones. He acknowledges the history, he acknowledges what happens, but he's also a realist, and he goes, you know what, if we're going to preserve, protect, encourage this in the future, we need to call it co-culture or collaborate. You know, I love his perspective on that, which is really healthy and really.
Damien's like that too, and I love listening to Damien talk about it. And hopefully, you'll get to chat to Damien on the podcast too.
We will.
Listening to Damien talk about, you know, the moving forward stuff is you know, Damien, you know, he puts it way more beautifully than me. But yeah, it's there is so much precious knowledge that out there with our Indigenous people that they want to share and that they want to protect, and we need to collaborate, and we need to create a safe space for that to be done in, because there is bad blood and there is a lot of trust to be had. We have to build relationships, and we have to be open, and we have to have an open mind about the way we do that, and we have to have an open heart and collaborate and not compete. I think collaboration over competition needs to happen with everything, you know. For this native food industry to be an industry and not a cottage industry, and not, you know, just something that we see on MasterChef every year, you know, we all need to collaborate.
talking about collaboration, what any projects coming up that you can let our listeners in on, that you'd like to share?
Oh, well, obviously the Higgs one is ongoing, which is really exciting. So we're working on that. The biggest project that we are working on is creating this climate resilient community program here, starting in the Clare Valley in our own home. So we're planning a demonstration garden, and our goal is to turn Wandu into a cooperative. We have 5 sort of trial farmers who are willing to take the leap of faith with us and start to integrate native plants in with their already existing stock, like their sheep and their wheat and their crops. And then we plan on opening up our place to other farmers to show them that we can create a climate resilient future here in the Clare Valley, adapt. As an example, we've just ripped up all of our almond trees because we don't have water for them anymore, so we need to plant something else. So that's really our next big project, is creating this space where people can learn, where we can continue to learn, where we can show people how they can use indigenous knowledge for the better. The fire training, the ranger training, the workshop space, all of that sort of stuff. That's what we're most excited about. We're also working on a really incredible project with Indigenasia and QUT on creating almost like a trust mark for the industry, so that people know. It's like that amazing apple sticker that was created, so we knew they were Aussie apples. It's the same thing. We're creating a easy way for people to know if they're buying something that's ethically produced.
So is that a certification, a verification?
Yes, it'll be a verification using blockchain sort of technology,
cool.
QR code sort of stuff, so people can see the story as well, the beautiful cultural story of where that gubbage came from, or that Davidson plum came from, or whatever. We're working on that. We're working on lots of really great. We're trying to put our effort and our time into things that have more of an impact than just a product being put on the shelf,
What's the limiting factor for you to do that?
Limiting factor? Apart from my mortgaging being paid, having sleep.
I mean, is it that funds need to be raised to support the creation?
We have just applied for some big grants, hoping to get some funding to get the demonstration garden planted, to get more farmers on board, to get more seedlings grown for said farmers.
Is that government funding?
Government, private, if you're a philanthropist out there and you want to do something good. We are having some great ecotourism conversations as well. We're creating some experiences that start in Clare and go out to country, out to the Flinders Ranges, to Damien's country. Damien's doing a lot more sort of other work, education work around cultural awareness training and stuff. And I'm going to be doing a PhD on this climate resilient communities through native food and indigenous knowledge topic. We're writing another book, a native food book. So our next Wandu book comes out next June, which is really exciting. So that one's more about substitution and being able to just quickly identify and understand how to replace something true. I keep saying traditional with these.
Well, you just said one out the back in your garden.
Yeah, look, we just the native celery instead of normal celery. We planted this drinks garden that. There's all the beautiful things that can go into tea or in your cocktails or your mocktails or your cordials, and they're all, native, replacing traditional basil with bush basil, just those easy ways for people to understand how to cook, learn how to cook with it a bit more. There's lots of really, really great things going on, and I think as long as things come back to our mission statement around regenerating culture, community, tradition, health and soil, then we're up for it. We're open to anything.
Well, hopefully someone who's hearing this, can help out.
Yeah.
I mean, just sort of, I don't know. This is what the whole idea of the podcast really is, and the interviews is to, it's not for people just listening. Oh, that was nice, and then go on the merry way.
Fuzzies.
Yeah, warm fuzzies. It's like
it's the call to action, right?
Totally.
It's the heart, it's the science, it's the call to action. I always think that the only way to make change and for people to break habits and form new ones is if they have a non-doomy gloomy call to action, you know, not feeling woeful, not feeling powerless, not feeling like they can't actually make a difference. Everyone can make a difference, you know, whether it's just breaking that habit of getting a takeaway coffee, you know, every morning and with a paper cup, you know, and taking a cup. It's like Costa always says, you know, we learned how to leave the house with our keys and our wallet and our phone. Now all we need to do is learn to not forget our keep cup and our eco bag, you know, and then before long it'll be another thing and another thing. It takes mere weeks to break habits, you know, and form new good ones, you know, in every sense of the word. And those call to actions, if people are, you know, given something that they can go and act upon, you know, there are plenty of things out there we can do.
And you know, like Hamish and I do, we sort of stress in our 2-day intro to biodynamics is we want everyone to finish on day 2 with what they can then implement the next day.
Absolutely.
It's not like,
Straight
I've got to
away.
go and read another book or go and do another course. It's like, you know, you can literally, we give you stuff to take home and the next day, that night even, you can be doing stuff that brings your learnings into the context of your garden or your farm or whatever it is immediately. And then it's from, you know, then you observe, then you feel, then you learn, you know, learning experientially, you know, which is what.
Absolutely. Go learn what country you're on. Learn how to say it. Learn how to say hello and plant a warrigal green or a bush basil or a native thyme.
Because that's a really cool thing, isn't it? There are straight substitutional stuff. It's not as though you got to go, I've got to change my bloody...
Almost direct. For, you know, there's cinnamon myrtle. You have to get cinnamon from, you know, elsewhere. There is almost a direct. Yeah. And if there's not a direct, there's something pretty bloody close. And I'm not telling you to just go and eat purely indigenous food. You won't survive unless you're a TO and you know what you're doing. You know, don't just start picking things willy-nilly, but you know, just be open to learning and trying. You know, I think everyone, when they learn to cook with spices, and there's a whole native spice pantry out there for you to play around with and have fun with and experiment with and learn. We're all learning.
Well, Rebecca, I've learned a huge amount today. Thank you. Not just sitting here with you now, but you know, out in your land, just as we look upon as the sun is going down a little way. This has been wonderful, and I really appreciate the time you've given me and Damo and Mum, and
thank you.
You know it's your Sunday, it's your time, and I know Damo's away, you know, some part of the week. So for him to give me you for a period of time, I'm really grateful for as well. I'm sure. As long as you can give me him,
yes, I will.
At some other point.
In the next couple of days, for sure. He's all yours.
We'll work something out. That was wonderful. I've learned so much, and I trust listeners have as well. And I trust this is not the last time we get to chat. No, about
thank you for
this
having
sort of
me.
Stuff.
Appreciate it. And
Pleasure.
Thanks for eating all my apricot.
I'm going to have another one. I want to sign off going, oh, no. That's cute. Do we do one of these? Hang on.
Let's do